Hello, and welcome to the Arizona Civics Podcast. In this podcast, we will share our journey of sustaining Arizona's interest in reforms to civics by collaborating with civic educators in our state and nationwide. This important work is being spearheaded by the Center for American Civics at Arizona State University. I'm Liz Evans, Civic Education Program Director at ASU, and your host for this podcast. I will interview teachers, content experts, and civic education leaders throughout our episodes, providing valuable insights and perspectives. We hope you enjoy joining us on this journey to make Arizona a national civics model. Welcome back, everyone, to the Rebuilding Arizona Civics Podcast. Today, we are having kind of a reflection episode. We're looking at how we rolled out the training, how we rolled out the summer work. And the purpose of this is to give you a quick view of what we did, but also if this is something that other states want to do, we really want to share this so that other states or other entities can learn from it, because we've had the ability to do this work now for 9 months. And there was a lot we learned from it. So I am joined by my task force chairs once again. And we're just kind of step into it. So my first question, if my task force chairs here just want to give kind of a quick overview of how we rolled out the training, the summer work, what that kind of looked like. And Tara, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Liz. So in terms of our summer work and the overall training, I'm going to give just kind of a broad overview and then allow my fellow task force chairs to kind of put in some further details and contextualization there. For the training, I think I'm going to start really with like the recruitment aspect. And I know we did a mindful approach in terms of who to include in the program. And we had teachers ranging from the most southern region of the state to the most northern region of the state. And that's where Jeremy, Tammy, and I really came into play, because we split the state into 3 overarching regions, right? So I had the northern region, Jeremy had the southern region, and Tammy took the central region. And from there is really how we approach the work, working with teachers in these groups, but then also individually. And the training spanned from January, I think, is when we kicked it off. So January 2022. And the training itself went through that kind of spring semester of the academic school year until about April and May. From that point, after we had a lot of the kind of whole group trainings and groundings around the different aspects of the Educating for American Democracy roadmap, the summer work really kicked in that month of May and carried through really through late August. And that summer work entailed each of us, again, the 3 task force chairs with our specific regions, working on producing a lesson plan and a list of resource materials to support rolling out the EAD framework and roadmap to more teachers, hopefully, this coming academic school year and beyond.
And for listeners too, where we were doing the podcast during this time, because one of the things, because we were doing these very specific trainings for these teachers, we wanted to make sure there was extra resources out there. And for some people, they like watching videos, some like listening to podcasts. Like there's so many different ways. But at this time too, we're also recording the podcast. Jeremy, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just that I think our approach of doing the overall program in 2 distinct phases made sense. One of the things that I've run into, or a problem that I ran into when I was in the classroom and even in admin, that oftentimes we have professional development or staff development, and it takes place over a short period of time. It's a blast of information, and then there's no time to let folks marinate in it. There's no time for folks to practice it and get feedback from the people who presented it to them. And so it's this expectation of, well, we're just going to blast a bunch of information at you, and then you're going to be able to do it proficiently. And that's that. So I liked how we divided it into the a couple of months of study, and then the lesson and the unit development, which was the summer work, where the teachers were able to put into practice what they had studied, but then also get ongoing feedback about that, which I mean, I see the lesson in the unit develop the summer work phase as really having two purposes. It hopefully helps solidify the understanding and the knowledge of EAD with those teachers, and then produces some, what we could use as model products.
One of the things that I really liked and thought was very effective was the use of the Google Classroom. So we were able to have the participants as part of a Google Class. So after we did a webinar or a blog post, it gave the participants a chance to reflect and to process and then to respond. And I thought that was really, really effective. The one thing I thought would have made it just a little bit better is if there was an opportunity for them to reflect and respond to each other a little bit more, because I think getting those conversations started would have been beneficial. And I also liked that we had smaller groups so they could collaborate, which was nice. Because when we did the training rollout in the summer work, we ended up dividing into the 3 regions. And we were able to take that smaller group, and I was in charge of the central region, and have our own little community of practice where individuals could collaborate with each other on their summer project.
So the nice thing too, I have my 3 task force chairs during this time at the same time as the person kind of running and responsible for the grant deliverables. I am every training we have, we're gathering information, we're getting post reflections, because for the 4 of us, it was really important, kind of like Jeremy said, we didn't want it to just be a sit and get, and then they forget it. We wanted it to build. And so every time we did all our trainings via Zoom, because we have 30 teachers throughout our state, and the state of Arizona, I mean, maybe is small in comparison to other states, but going from top to bottom takes quite a while. And to have these teachers coming from all these different places, Zoom is accessible. They can hop on after school. And a lot of times what we would do, the 4 of us, is we would look at the training, look at the responses from the teacher, and then kind of develop the next one from there. We already had the topic, but we wanted to make sure that it was something they wanted, it was something they got. And if we missed something, like if they didn't understand the design challenges, or they didn't understand, the themes or anything like that, that we were able to go back and really connect things. And I actually think a couple of trainings and podcast episodes came from those reflections, specifically the questioning, how to question students. That one came from that. So the outline of the training, and if you're listening to this, there will be a corresponding blog post, so you can kind of see the outline of it. So we talked about how we did it. The next question, and Jeremy, I'll start with you on this one, really reflecting, what are some things you really liked about it, and some things that maybe if we were to do it again, you'd do differently?
I think that, and I remember discussing this. This was a thread of discussion when we were building EAD. That the site has a ton of information, but the problem is it has a ton of information. And so where the most ready access points or on-ramps, whatever you want to call them, where those are is not very clear. And I think that if we were to do this again, I think we would benefit, and teachers would benefit from us putting together a formal training packet from content on the site instead of using the site, because I mean, you can point back to the site, but I think in a way the site is, and I see this often, like, great websites with lots of information on them are actually not, oftentimes they're not well organized to help someone understand, okay, in the simplest terms, what is this? What utility can I get out of this? What's the value of this? And then where do I start getting my head around it? Where do I start understanding it? So I think that building a deliberate, like a course of sorts from the site instead of using the site might be better, because then you could provide the whole thing to someone, or provide it in pieces. And I think we tried to do that but I think going back and looking over it again would probably be helpful.
Tara, is there anything you wanted to add really to that reflection piece of the rollout as a whole?
Yeah, I think really what I would do differently just stems from the overall timeline. I think starting in that spring semester and having the work then, bleed out into the summer months, just that was, I know, very difficult for our teachers in terms of, their own summer plans, but then also their own mental health and really probably wanting to take a break and a step back from teaching as a whole, right, after such a difficult year post-COVID. So I think really my only critique in that is just perhaps if we had started at the beginning of the year or even a little bit more in the fall semester. I know we spent a lot of time in that first month or two just onboarding teachers to what is this Educating for American Democracy framework, right? And it really flips teaching history and civics on its head in terms of the approach and using different resources beyond what teachers might have traditionally or just longitudinally been using. And so I think my only change I would make is if we had started that onboarding maybe in October, November, or even into December, and giving teachers just those few months in the fall to acclimate themselves to what is this that I'm jumping into and what is this that I'm going to be doing, and kind of learning a little bit about the framework. Because I know once we, as you talked about, Liz, we had the podcast, we used, the Google Classroom site. We had different reading materials for them to dive into. We did the, bi-weekly or every few week presentation trainings around the different aspects, such as the themes or the pedagogical, approaches and the design challenges. So I think those could be better spent giving time, as Jeremy cited, in that spring semester of a deeper dive and having a bunch of the kind of onboarding or just big picture themes taken care of earlier.
So I thought that the training piece of the rollout went well. Like Jeremy had previously said, it was very compact due to circumstance. I think that if we were to do it again, I think it would have been beneficial maybe if we had all come together as a group in person if possible, so we could physically meet our community, and then perhaps done some table setting with the participants where we got the participants to really think about why this work is important, what their values were as civics and history teachers, and really think about why the EAD work was needed for Arizona civics. And in that case, maybe have brought in one of the EAD principal investigators like Dr. Peter Levine or Dr. Jane Kaminsky to introduce EAD to them from that idea of this is important, here's what's happening, this is why it will lead to systemic change, and do a little bit of Q&A with the participants. I think that would have made it feel special when we got together for our first time. And instead of diving right into the content of the roadmap and the pedagogy companion, it would have really established the importance of it. And they would have heard from the original creators of it, why they chose to participate in this program and what they got out of it.
And I 100% agree with you. And for our listeners, the reason that didn't happen is because I was hired right before Thanksgiving. So December for us was really the four of us kind of getting, even though we all knew each other, I think before this, we'd all worked in different capacities together. It's different. And we wanted to make sure that even though we were kind of, I don't want to use the word rushing, but we were on a pretty tight timeline to get this started. It was really important for the four of us to make sure that everything we were doing was very mindful, very much putting the teachers in the front of our minds as we were planning. But yeah, if I were to do this again, I would have started the onboarding in kind of the October thing. August and September are always really hard because teachers are starting. There's so much going on. October, it calms down a little bit. But that I think all very excellent points. And if we were to do it again, and hopefully we can, it'll look a little bit different. So my next question, summer work has been brought up, and one of the things I really appreciated about kind of being the project manager of this was that each group during the summer could do what worked best for them, right? Some of you guys met in person, some did Zoom. It was just very different for everyone. So I want this next question, and Tara, I'll start with you, is really discuss how you specifically took the group of teachers you had and made sure summer work worked. What did it entail? And the purpose of this question is to just kind of show that we all did a little differently, and that's okay, because we met the needs of the teachers we had. So Tara, I'll have you start.
Yeah. So just as a reminder, I had the Northern Arizona cohort of teachers, which just the northern, geographic range of where these teachers were located was pretty spread out. And so we did a lot, and really just all of our trainings and summer work via Zoom for that purpose, just because of the travel time between each of the folks on that cohort. And it started off really with just some grounding summer meetings around, all right, what is the expectation, right? Creating this lesson plan and list of resources. But then a little bit of a dive into, all right, we have, these 7 themes. How are we going to capture at least one theme, right, in each of these lessons? And oddly enough, and I guess fortunately enough, there were 7 teachers in the Northern cohort that were going to be working across these themes. And so each of them took a theme kind of as their main thrust or their main focus for their lesson. That's not to say other themes were then eventually covered once they started actually writing out their lessons, right? But that, I think, gave each of them a little bit of a greater focus in terms of what was it they actually wanted to do a deeper dive and create something with. And once that was established, we just kind of talked about the basic, skeletal factors that go into, a great lesson plan, especially one that's inquiry based. And then we started actually pooling some resources. And so we had, a running list that we were sharing amongst ourselves, just of these different sites and organizations that offer, primary sources across the spectrum, historical takes on those, but then also ways that other lesson plans were supporting strategies or pedagogies and how to deliver the content. And so kind of drawing, for example, Socratic seminars, right? So kind of drawing on these pieces that make a great inquiry-based lesson. And from there, the teachers really they hit the ground running, and I held some open kind of office hours if they were able to pop in for some feedback. They even shared lessons amongst themselves in breakout rooms during some of those meeting times to kind of get some feedback and some, ideas from their fellow cohort. And that was helpful, especially when we were pairing teachers, vertically amongst, a high school and a middle school teacher, or a middle school and an elementary school teacher, to just kind of see how that lesson would lend itself to, the standards and learnings and grades either above or below. So that was really how our summer was spent. And I will just say, my teachers that were in the Northern cohort did a really nice job in producing some strong lesson plans that captured the theme that they had, selected. And I'm just super excited to see those up on the website and getting those formatted and out so other Arizona teachers can lean into that.
So when it came to doing the summer work for the Central region, what we ended up doing is we ended up having some meetings together initially to talk about the different aspects of the summer work, what the deliverables need to have, and to review some of the resources that were available to them for doing the summer work. I also used a Jamboard with them and had them really talk about what connected with them with EAD, what they were most interested in doing for their lesson plan or unit plan. We also focused on the fact that they should do something that they would be teaching in the first quarter of the school year, so we could get some feedback about how that went right from the start. And that would also have them begin to focus in on what was necessary to create that EAD classroom in the very beginning. So for our region, what ended up happening is a lot of the participants broke up into small collaborative groups. And we had this amazing group of elementary specialists and teachers, and they were a group of 3, and they decided to tackle the 3rd grade standards, which are Arizona. And there's not a lot of resources for teachers on Arizona, especially inquiry and using EAD. So that was a really unique and special unit plan that they created. And that was very, very exciting. We also had some of our advanced placement teachers work together to infuse EAD into the advanced placement curriculum, and then our economics teachers. So what I really liked is I gave the participants the freedom to pursue their summer work. I did check-ins with them, and I was available for office hours. But for the most part, they determined their own schedule because summer is very difficult with all of the travel that happens. I think, though, had I done it again, I would have mandated more in-person or virtual meetings, had more of a schedule, and work that out ahead of time with the participants. Because I think sometimes some of the participants weren't on the same page, and there was a lot of reteaching that ended up happening.
In Southern Arizona, we had a varied group in terms of grade levels and subjects. So we had some middle school folks. We had American history. We had American government, and people. There was a lot of interest in a lot of different ideas. So we didn't have as much of an opportunity. And I didn't want to shoehorn things. I didn't want to force artificial connections and relationships. So we really didn't have anyone working together, directly on lessons. But what we decided as a group, this was back in May, was that everyone would produce a unit of study. And then within that unit, and that unit would be, it would be something that would have at least 5 one-day lessons. And of that, they would create a certain number of those lessons. They would create the first lesson, the last lesson, and a lesson or two somewhere in the middle to serve as the bookends and maybe call it like tent poles. And the idea behind that was if someone understands, if a teacher reading this wanting to understand EAD, I think if you just give them something very much at the granular level, like a single day lesson, I don't know how much that can communicate the full breadth, or at least some like large share of the breadth of EAD. Whereas a unit with different instructional techniques and different uses of resources over time, but connected together, we thought that would make sense. So that's what we ended up doing as a group.
And then, for me, again, as overseeing this, I kind of came up with, in conjunction with the ideas from the task force chairs, what summer deliverables would look like. Because this whole thing is funded by the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Act. And so we're spending public money, and we want to really ensure the fidelity of what we're doing. We want to make sure that, the teachers who are being paid know exactly what they're being paid for. It was very transparent process. I might have over communicated because that's just kind of my leadership style. But for me, I, really making sure everybody understood what we're doing, why we're doing it, because I'm having to make sure that the grant deliverables are being met. And I'm going to say, going through, all the lessons and the units, it by far has exceeded, what I thought, because we have elementary lessons, we have junior high lessons, we have high school lessons, we have econ lessons, history, government. There's so many things. And I can't wait. Right now we have some civic education interns who are going through the lessons and cataloging them so that we can put them up on our website, because one of the things I really care about is people have access to these, especially Arizona teachers. We want Arizona teachers to have these lessons created by practicing Arizona teachers. So that was something that was really important.
I should have had more in-person meetings because most of my teachers were in this area. I don't know how successful that would have been because of all the different, comings and goings over the summer. I had people all over the place, but I think that I think that I fell into an unexamined assumption that doing things via Zoom and email, it's like, that's how we've done it for the last couple of years. That'll work. But there is no substitution. There's no substitute rather for in person and sensing like you actually get this or not. Zoom just can't. Zoom and email can't do that.
And that was hard too, because again, as was said before, the timeline was so short. So we did the best we could with what we had, but it's kind of nice now to go back and say, hey, if we ever do this again, or if any other state ever does this again, here are some things to really consider. And I think that in-person piece, even though our state is very large, would write it into the grant, right? Like write that travel in, write that time in, so that teachers can come together to have these meetings, especially in the summer.
Although the trouble is, again, it's summer. People are coming and going. It's like this checkerboard of availability. So I don't know how effective it would have been, but I think if we were to do this again and I were in this position, I would do that.
I definitely agree with you on that, Jeremy, because I did not have any in-person meetings with my cohort. And as you said, like Zoom and email does not capture like the rich conversations, not only between myself and the different teachers in the cohort, but amongst them as well, right? And I will say my cohort was heavily high school teachers. There were, I think, 2 elementary, but even our 2 elementary teachers, we had, very much the primary grades and then one of the upper primary grades. So there was, some grade band separation there as well. And so, I would almost even suggest bringing together all the teachers at some point in the summer for kind of a little in-person couple day institute to really set the groundwork at the beginning of summer work before we did kind of go into, again, our separate cohorts. And I think to that point, that would have been a great opportunity to do beyond the EAD framework and roadmap, some training on how to really write high quality, rigorous, inquiry-based lesson plans, because I think that's a skill that, teachers will be able to use even beyond this opportunity that they've had. And so I would think that it would have, I think, helped some of the early frustrations or confusions or just misunderstandings that maybe teachers had and like, how am I going to put this together, right? But then also lend itself to being able to work with folks in your specific grade or grade band a little more closely.
And if you're writing a grant out there, because again, this is something we all inherited, I would have absolutely done that. We did have a teacher program for our center separately, and it was amazing. And I think that for me, writing grants in the future, there is going to be that summertime so that even before teachers commit to this work, they understand here's, a week in the summer, probably in Flagstaff, because summer in Arizona, right? Flagstaff is beautiful. I'm a little biased because I went to school up there, but I think you're right, Tara, that the conversations, and I think sometimes you learn something in a training and you're like, oh, I get that, like blah, blah, blah. But then you go to practice it and you don't get it, but that conversation is over and you don't have the people to have that, back and forth with. So again, as the person who is overseeing everything, if I write another grant for something like this, I absolutely will have that time in the summer. And again, where this is at no cost to teachers, we're paying for them to come, we're paying for the travel, the hotel, all that good stuff. But the nice thing is when you have times like that, even, the training is really great, but sometimes, the breakfast conversations are where we see changes, or the dinner or after dinner conversations when you're not in a training capacity, but you're just more chatting back and forth about your classrooms and that's really where those ideas come out. So I 100% agree. I think, Jeremy, like you, I took for granted that Zoom is a thing and it's easy, and email is a thing and it's easy. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a lot easier to be in person, and to catch those little moments where people don't get it.
What do I wish had been different with the process? I think what I wish had been different was that we had some exemplar unit plans and lesson plans that teachers could look at beforehand to see how EAD really infused into the unit plans and the lesson plans. I think it was a little overwhelming for them to, after really a short learning schedule of the webinars, sit down really and get as deep as they could into EAD. So I saw a lot of lesson plans that took what they would normally teach and then connected an EAD theme to it. I would have liked to see more original infusion and creation of new lessons that really took aspects of EAD, the state standards, and their curriculum maps. I think the group that did that really well was the teachers who did the third grade, because that didn't exist before. That was brand new. And it really infused the idea of the design challenges, the driving questions, inquiry, and really that philosophy of the EAD student and classroom.
And at the time this podcast post, listeners will have already heard from two of those teachers, because not only did they do a little bit of writing for our website, but they're also going to be on the podcast talking about, what that is. And I think that that's a huge thing, right? Third grade, because I think a lot of times in elementary school, it's like, oh, we have social studies for 20 minutes every other day. And to really tie these things in is so important, because most of the elementary teachers I have talked to want to do more social studies. They just don't know where to start. And so I love, and this lesson, again, once everything calms down, will be on the website, will be widely available. But this lesson, it just is very much a take it and go. And it was so cool to read it, and then to have a couple of the authors of that do pieces of writing, and do the podcast for us. So it's all just very exciting.
So to wrap up this, and I cannot believe I'm saying wrap up, because our grant is almost over. We're done in 9 days. Like it baffles me how quickly this has all moved for us. I'd like to know what your favorite part of this work was. I think that ending on that note is really positive. And I want to say my favorite part has been working with the three of you, working with teachers. And I feel like we've made a small dent, maybe a big dent, in the evolving of civic education in our state. I think a lot of times when people hear education in the state of Arizona, it's negative. There are a lot of positive things happening in our state, and the work that the four of us have done, our 30 teachers, really speaks to that. And so I think being an observer for a lot of this has really lit a fire in me to continue to want to help teachers, to continue to want to move, the Educating for American Democracy and the roadmap further, because it's something that, as a civic educator for over 2 decades, I am 100% on board with. I really think it could be so helpful to students, to teachers, to our community. So, favorite part of the work, and any final comments you have?
My favorite part of this work was working with educators and seeing their enthusiasm and excitement about EAD and the work, hearing about their classrooms and what they were already doing and how they were going to change it. I also really liked this idea of learning with them, because every time they learned something, I learned something as well. And I liked being part of those conversations. It really excited me for the what's going to be happening in the classrooms in Arizona with these teachers. And it really excites me to know that their students are going to be benefiting from the work that they've done. I would love to, once they start teaching these lessons, pop in and see how they're doing, talk to their students, and observe their classes. I also really enjoyed working with the other task force chairs. And although I've worked with them on separate types of projects over the years, this project really brought us together to share really what is unique about each of us and the gifts that we bring to the process in the project. And then also working with Liz and working with that aspect of it, really getting to know what the center was doing and how they were supporting this work. And I do have to say, one of my favorite things was I've never done a podcast before, and I really love doing it. So that was a new skill I learned and something that I'm going to take with me and use in my work.
So this is going to be super cliche, but my favorite part of the work was this podcast. Honestly, being able to talk through obviously what we as task force chairs were experiencing, doing the work ourselves with our, teachers, but then also being able to look really holistically at the roadmap and where this was going to lead, Arizona broadly. And so just having these conversations, as you were talking about, Liz, it's so rich. And it wasn't, during our trainings, just a little back end detail, Liz would send us the questions ahead of time. So I had, that space to do personal reflection before coming into this space with Jeremy, Tammy, and you, Liz. And that, I think, for me was a large takeaway, being able to listen how Jeremy processed these questions in the context of the work with his, teachers and cohort, but then against the, EAD framework and roadmap broadly. And same with Tammy. So I learned a lot personally, and I just really enjoyed having these discussions and knowing that they were going to be shared for greater impact. So yeah, kind of cliche, but my favorite thing was this.
This is going to be so lame, but I'm going to do it anyway. I actually enjoyed this too. I enjoyed the podcast aspect, but also just our meetings, the four of us, because it forced me to think about this from perspectives I hadn't considered. And just, you just someone asked a question, and I thought, oh, I didn't even know that question existed. And I've always found that stimulating intellectually to have to, just to be exposed to ideas and angles on things that you wouldn't ever bring to the table or wouldn't even consider are sitting on a table somewhere. And so I enjoyed that a lot. And actually, this is going to sound really corny, but I'm sincere about this, that this is a part of EAD. You bring people together. We're bringing our fellow citizens together to try to accomplish something for the good of others. And we come at it from different perspectives, and we bring different priorities and values and things like that, but we still end up figuring out a way to roll the ball forward together or carry the telephone pole together. And that, there's your mini republic. We were a republic of four, creating something, and hopefully that will do some good.
I don't think either of those lame, corny, or cliche. For me, as the project lead, if you will, I loved the pushback. I loved the questions because, like you said, Jeremy, it made me consider things that I haven't considered. And I think even with our teachers in the trainings, they would ask questions, and it's like, wow, I didn't even think of that, because right now the four of us are not practicing in classrooms. That's not wholly true. Jeremy is teaching one class. For me, I never wanted to be one of those people who, left the classroom, but always thought I knew exactly what was going on in classrooms. I haven't been in a classroom in 2 years. And it's always helpful to have the point of educators, to have the point of people who, like Jeremy is in Southern Arizona, or to hear something from Holbrook, which is a very small town in Northern Arizona, and have these different conversations, or elementary school teachers who are like, hey, we have to teach English. We have to teach math. We have such small amount of time we can dedicate to this and really problem solving through that. So I very genuinely hope that even though this part is over, we are not over, because I will say our meetings too, and listeners splicing this podcast, because a lot of times we just hop in these meetings and we talk and we talk and we talk and we get off topic, or, have these ideas. It's just been a really, really positive and fun thing. So thank you to my task force chairs who have made this such a rich experience for me, and also for our teachers. And, we appreciate everything you do. And hopefully this will not be the last time people hear your voices on our podcast. Thank you for joining us. Just wanted to give a heads up that you can find the Center for American Civics on all social media channels as ASU Civics. We love connecting with our community and sharing our thoughts on the issues that matter to us. So if you're interested in our content or just want to say hi, don't hesitate to give us a follow. Plus, we always include any relevant links in our podcast show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thanks for being a part of our journey.